Dreaming about my mother last night and her passing has caused me to revisit a lot of things that I had to also go through in forgiving her after her passing. You see, my mother was a beautiful woman. Everyone loved her. Everyone loved her. They all thought that she was so strong and so brave and so kind. And she was. I mean, she had survived 2 aneurysms, brain surgery twice. She had brain damage, but still found a way to drive again. She was paralyzed on her left side for 25 years of her life. She was a pretty amazing woman, but she was also flawed. And those of us who knew her on the backside of that smile knew the flaws. We knew that she lied constantly. We knew that she believed that you ask for forgiveness instead of permission. We also knew that she was a Republican. She was a hardcore Republican. She was the kind of person who would go and vote against her grandchildren in the elections because she didn't want her taxes to go to the school system. Now, mind you, the only taxes my mom paid were car taxes because she lived in subsidized housing because she was paralyzed on her left side, and she lived in a senior complex that was subsidized for rent because she was on a fixed income. But she would take all of her little old lady friends that lived in that complex and pile them into her car, and she would drive them in shifts so that they could go and vote against the educational budget and the fire department budget. The same lady who would burn all of her meals, and the fire department would come and help turn off her alarms. The same lady who would have to call the fire department to come and save her with an ambulance when she would have sepsis or she would have issues that we couldn't get her out of bed. She would take all of her friends and she would bus them down to the school to vote against a new ambulance or a new fire truck because she didn't want her taxes to go to that. Now, think about that. It kind of sounds a little bit familiar, doesn't it? It kind of comes into today's day and age where people are saying, well, I don't want to pay for that. It doesn't benefit me. I don't want my taxes to go to that. I want to pay my taxes. I want my money to go to where I want to go. And what they don't realize is that the money that they are voting against and the money that they think that they're going to be saving is actually money that was allocated to save them in the first place. And it's awful. And it's awful that we have to forgive them for that because they know not what they do. My mother was also a devout Christian. She also had all sorts of morals, and she felt herself to be a very open-minded person. But she was also a bigot. She was raised to be this way. Things were supposed to be the way that they were always supposed to be, and she truly, genuinely believed that the way that things were is how they should always be. I had friends that I was very close to in high school. I was very involved in the Rainbow Girls, and I had a lot of DeMolay brothers that I was very, very close to. And after an event one time, my mom, she was driving all the guys home, and one of my closer friends, he was just a doll. He was like the best dressed. He was gorgeous. He was charismatic. And my mom loved him. She thought he was the bomb. So we drove them all home one day. And on the way back home, my mom says to me, Carrie, she's like, I really, really like Terry, but I don't want you to date him. And I was like, okay, wasn't going to anyway. He's gay. I thought that's what she was getting at. I thought she was worried that I was going to try and date this charismatic gay man. But no, you know what it was? It was because he was black. My mother told me she didn't feel comfortable with the idea of me dating a black man because she just didn't want her grandchildren to not look like her daughter. Joke's on her. My 4 kids look like my husband. They don't look like me. But my point is she loved him. She thought he was wonderful. She thought he was great. She thought he was, kind and funny and talented and smart. And she also felt that he was not right for her daughter. This is her mindset. This is what she grew up with. This is who she was. She was a nice lady. She was nice to him. But behind the scenes, she had her opinions, and she felt that her opinions were what stood and what mattered. And I have a feeling that she would probably be very on board with a lot of these things that are happening now. I bet you she would sit there and say, even though she requires required medication every single day until the day she died, I think she would have had trouble with the fact that her daughter was on an SSRI. I think the fact that her death, which threw me into a spiral and I ended up on Lexapro as a result of, bothered her. I bet you she would have hated that. I bet you she would have told me to just suck it up. I bet you she would have voted for RFK just because his last name was Kennedy. That's about as deep as her political mindset went. I believe that she would think DEI was a joke and that it wasn't right and that everything should be, why should anybody else have a leg up when I'm not getting a leg up? I bet you she would have thought that abortions should be banned. Which is really funny, seeing as I had multiple miscarriages and I just never told her about them. I think that she would stand true to these beliefs that she was raised to believe because that's how she was taught. And she believed that her parents were right. And totally forgetting the fact that she too was a parent. And maybe her children were right. Because none of her 4 children believe the same things she does. And I thank my father for that. My father, who went from being a white-collar square to a hippie to a yuppie, he raised us to think differently. He raised us that love was love. He raised us to believe that everyone should be included. And you know what? I think that I'm grateful for him, for the things that he did in that regard. And yes, there will be things that I'll have to forgive him for later on, but it'll be a very different kind of forgiveness because the things that she believed in are very hurtful now. And I feel it very much so now as a person trying to find some light and positivity in the way that this country is headed. I think she would have been happy with it. And I think I need to forgive her for that.